Second place in our book is for nothing but losers. We care about nothing but first place. And what does it take to get there? That's what a true top-level champion mindset is all about. We know what it takes to get there. The discipline that goes into it, the commitment to diet, the commitment to time management, the commitment to making sure you where you need to be and doing what you need to do and not making excuses. Once you become number one, you don't want to lose that position. They're looking to take your place. So as a true champion, you want to make sure that don't happen. So you take your butt to work the next day. Gladiators are gladiators. That's what top-level professional athletes are.
You guys understand that game, but like you said, more and more these days with the public and now probably with the internet and Instagram, everybody wants it now. They think they can get it now. People act like they got it yesterday, and it becomes this kind of vicious cycle.
It takes time to build a masterpiece. Form, technique, training principles. Nothing was done overnight. I do not want it to be said that I spent my life on the golf course chasing a friggin' little ball or on the boat riding up and down the water catching fish while there's a lot of young men that out there that need to be caught, that need to be saved, that need to have a conversation. And at the end of the day, we will all have to give an account of what we did with our life. What was our journey all about? Did we just mind our own business and just take care of us? Or did we impact the world for good? Did we honor God by making the world a better place? Did we influence in the right way? That's what the journey is all about.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Lee Haney, the former American professional bodybuilder who was crowned the Mr. Olympia champion an incredible 8 consecutive times from 1984 to 1991 and considered one of the sport's greatest champions. You won your first event as a teenager in 1979 and are the only champion to remain undefeated before retiring from the sport at the age of 31. You were renowned for your pioneering science-based approach to training and nutrition, which allowed you to combine size with a classical physique. You have been critical of modern training techniques that leave many athletes with long-term injuries and irreversible damage, hence your mantra, stimulate, don't annihilate. Since you're retiring, you have trained professional athletes and celebrities while also helping young men achieve their potential through the Haney Harvest House, your mentoring program that aims to create a clear definition of manhood. Lee, welcome to London Real.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. Heard a lot about your show. Incredible.
Thank you, Lee. It's so great to have you on here. And the truth is that we kind of owe our success and popularity to Mr. Olympia in some ways, because back in January 2013, when nobody was doing this independent broadcasting stuff, we had a guy on the show named Dorian Yates. And to be honest, Lee, I didn't know much about Dorian. And he came down, and I remember thinking we might need a bigger chair for this guy. You know, I just didn't know much about, who was going to show up. And the audience didn't either, because my audience didn't necessarily know who Mr. Olympia was. And when he sat down in the chair, his episode was our biggest episode ever at the time. And I think, Lee, people were surprised by how intelligent Dorian was, how articulate he was, how spiritual and how knowledgeable he was, because I think for some reason, they expected a Mr. Olympia to be something else. And, I was wondering, maybe we can start off there, Lee, and tell me, What does the world not understand of what it takes for a bodybuilder to become Mr. Olympia, that champion on stage, all the sacrifice behind the scenes? What does the world not really know about what happens behind the scenes to get there?
Well, it takes a level of commitment, a super level of commitment, as I'm sure Dorian explained while he was being interviewed and so forth. And by the way, Dorian is a great friend of mine. He's an incredible athlete, also an incredible competitor, during my era. So I have the greatest of respect for him. I mean, so we know what it takes to get there, and the discipline that goes into it and the stick-to-itness, it's a whole nother level. But such as that in any professional top-level athletes, there's a lot of professional athletes, but the ones that on the top of the ladder, the top of the chain, they're cut from a sort of a different type of mold. The commitment there, the commitment to diet, the commitment to time management, commitment to making sure where you need to be and doing what you need to do and not making excuses. There's a lot of athletes, they can find excuses as to why they're not committed to a specific thing, why I wasn't as good and well, it's okay to be second or third place. Well, hardcore nitty gritty athletes like myself or Dorian Yates, we don't feel good about second place. Second place in our book is for nothing but losers. We care about nothing but first place. And what does it take to get there? That's what a true top level champion mindset is all about.
Yeah, I remember asking Dorian, how did he celebrate when he won Mr. Olympia? And he said, what do you mean celebrate? He said, I was supposed to win. I went home that night and I started training the next day.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. You have your meal. Okay. You went to work. You've been working for the last several months. Guess what? You got a raise. You get paid. You be smart with your investments, use your money wisely. Then you back to work the next couple of days. You give the body a little time to recover. Okay. Now we back to work. But the other thing too, is this thing inside of you, once you become number one, you don't want to lose that position. You don't want to lose that spotlight. So you're thinking ahead of time as to how do I stay here? What do I need to do differently than what I've done before to keep me here? Let me look at this training. Let me look at this nutrition. Let me analyze this supplementation. Let me do all of those things. It's going to keep me on the top, because when you're on the top, there's nowhere else to go but down. You got a lot of guys snapping at your heels. They're looking to take your place. So as a true champion, you want to make sure that don't happen. So you take your butt to work the next day.
It's very different from becoming the champion to staying the champion, to staying on top of that hill, because everybody wants a piece of that. And you got to get even better in order to hold that, right?
Yeah, that's true. And that's where it can get a little dicey, because you can tend to overtrain, which is, one of the statements that I adhere to is training to stimulate, not annihilate. It's easy to overtrain and not give the body enough time to recover when your mindset is that. So you really have to step back and balance it out and don't overload the systems, which I've been guilty of doing that. And of course, Dorian has been guilty of doing that. That's why he sustained some injuries during his training debut. Listen, when you're up there, you want to do everything you can to stay up there. And in doing so, you can actually do more harm than you can good. But hey, that's the price you pay for being a gladiator. We're not regular people. No top athlete is a regular person, which sometimes when I hear regular people like commentators make comments, well, he should have did this and that. I'm like, listen at these guys. They are not in our shoes. They don't know what it feels like to run or jump or to lift or your heart is about to jump out of your chest. They know nothing of that. Gladiators, at least in times past, they fought to the death in arenas. That's what they did. That's how they're made. That's their psyche. So, but thank God today we have referees, we have restrictions and guidelines so they don't end up destroying ourselves or destroying those in which we compete against. So that's the only thing that changes is what's have the outcome. We have guidelines and we have restrictions. Other than that, that gladiator mindset still exists and will always exist in top level athletes. We are testosterone monsters. We're not guys who sit behind a desk and with a pencil or a typewriter. That's not who we are. Gladiators are gladiators. That's what top level professional athletes are. And it's, oh no, he's acting a certain way. Wait a minute, he acts a certain way because he geared a certain way.
They say there's a fine line between genius and insanity.
Exactly. Modern day gladiators.
One of the things I realized when I was talking to Dorian is that as incredible as he was a champion, he was also incredibly knowledgeable. And I know to this day he trains a lot of athletes, but his knowledge of the body, of the stress systems, of the nutrition, of the recovery protocols was incredible when we dove deep into it. And he would tell me, he said, Brian, you don't understand. There was no internet back then. I had no coach. All I had was my own experimentation, my own log books, and maybe a couple magazines or a passed around black and white book, that I might have. And now I'm thinking about your era, Lee. 8 years earlier, you must have had even less. And I know you didn't have a coach. Can you walk through some of the young guys these days as to what it was like back then, having to discover it for yourself and actually really create the science yourself?
Yes, it was during an era in which there was very little information out there. You had your magazines like Muscle and Fitness, then you had Iron Man, you had Muscle Training Illustrated, very, very few. And during that time, the magazines mainly consisted of training and nutrition. It wasn't as commercialized as you see them now. So it was all about real good quality knowledge. And then the other thing that was very good, I know growing up in my hometown, you would find some of the older guys in the gym and they would share with you different training principles. Okay, you want to do that? You don't want to do this? Okay, that's too much weight you're using. So those kinds of tips and principles that was handed down through the generations helped me to become the person that I am today as far as my knowledge of training, knowledge of nutrition. I mean, at the age of 11 years old, I asked my parents for a set of weights, for Christmas, and they got them for me. And from inside of that little package of weights, there was a Charles Atlas book that had the basic principles of training, maybe one exercise per body part, the foundational exercises. And from those foundational exercises, everything else grew. But I stayed true to the principles that I had read there, which also matched up to the principles that was being given to me by some of the other senior weightlifters that I met at the YMCA. I met at some of the other gyms, such as Nautilus Fitness Centers and those kinds of things during that era. And then what I read in the magazine, programs handed down by Robbie Robertson, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Pete Grimkowski, Albert Beckles, which is from Great Britain, and, Roy Callender, a lot of the different guys, Franco Colombo, who created these programs. And they were true to the science of it. It wasn't any craziness, and you didn't see what is called coaches helping you. These were guys who trained together. They had training partners. And so I implemented the tools of what I had learned from looking into and studying their exercise routines and so forth. And I entered my first bodybuilding show when I was 16 years old. Did very well, didn't win, didn't place, but I was told by the judge, you got a lot of great potential. And I continued to follow those principles. I learned as much as I could about nutrition through reading the magazines. I mean, I grew up in the country where, sweet potatoes and yams was the mainstay. So it was pinto beans, so it was corn, so it was chicken, so it was eggs. So all of the good quality nutrients were there from day one, just from from growing up, from where I'm from. And so by implementing the training principles, good basic nutritional principles, I was able to imitate what I had read about, and my physique continued to grow and get better and better. So by the time I was 18, I entered my first regional show, which, let's back up. When I was 16, I entered my first show, the Mr. South Carolina. Didn't place, as I mentioned earlier, but I did very well. A couple of years later, I entered the Mr. Palmetto, won the show at the age of 18. I beat guys who was in their 30s and in their 40s. And then I went on to win the Mr. South. And again, at age 18. So because of having great information, because of following very good nutritional guidelines, I was able to super exceed guys who was older than me because of my willingness or my desire to follow the science that had been handed down to me by some of the legends of bodybuilding.
So you were eating whole foods back in the day before it became a thing and a whole marketplace you go to. Back in the day, that's what you grew up on, being in the country.
Exactly. I mean, that's the way we ate. You know, my grandpa had cows, he had pigs, he had chickens, he had all of that. So my food was organic and grown right from the land. And, you know, nothing's changed as far as that's concerned. You know, we don't say protein, carbohydrates, fats, you know, now they say micros and macros. It's the same thing. Tomatoes. They just changed the name a little bit, and that's basically it. And no, we didn't have coaches, didn't need coaches. We had training partners. You know, we say, okay, man, you look a little bit flat today, you know, so you need to increase your carbs a bit. So we knew what carbohydrates are the life force of the physique to get a nice pump. Protein was there to repair cell and tissue and be a good quality muscle. If you have more protein and not carbohydrates, then you're not going to fill out and develop as you should. So it's got to be a happy medium there. So the science of writing down, we had this little tablet where we would write down what we ate in the course of a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner. You know, how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbohydrate. So that as we look better, we were able to go back and figure out why we were looking better. If we looked a bit flat, we could go back scientifically and say, oh man, look, I've only had 100 grams of carbs and I feel a bit sluggish. So guess what? I need to increase my carbohydrate intake. Oh man, I only had 5 glasses of water today. I need to go back and add more water. So we experimented with nutrition. We experimented with training, not just training and nutrition just pulled out of the sky, but by the guidelines that had been handed down by those before us. I didn't make Lee Haney, not by myself. Neither did Dorian make Dorian by himself. But we did have to find out what worked good in our bodies individually, what made us feel good, what allowed us to grow better and recover better. Those are things that only you individually can know through nutrition. Nobody can do that and say, bam, that's what you need 100%, because they don't know, because they are not in your body. You're in your own body.
Yeah. Tell me about competition, especially the night of and maybe the days coming up to that onstage competition. I was actually just watching footage of you and Dorian, I think competing at Night of the Champions, maybe in 91. I'm not sure what it was. It was right when the kind of transition happened from you to Dorian. But what's it like when you got the young gun coming up to trying to take your spot? You know your reign is coming to an end, but you're also thinking, no, this is happening when I want it to happen. And then I might reflect on Dorian's mindset, because he's competing with a guy that he's looked up to for 6-7 years. You probably inspired him when he was a kid, and now he's got to beat the guy that's the hero in his dreams, and maybe you can use that against him. So tell me, what's that whole mindset process like, even behind the stage and on the stage?
Well, you know, if you kill the mind, you can impact the body. So this ability to try to psych out your opponents is very important if you can make it happen, and if you can reach into their heads, because we're dealing with several Olympians here. These guys are the best of the best. They're not passive. They're not, they're not kids. They are gladiators, and they're ready to cut head off. So how do you sort of move them from their game? I tell you what I did on this particular time, leading up to that last Olympia, is I would wait until, because there's a period of about 20 minutes before hitting the stage that the head MC or the person extraditing would say, okay, guys, you got 20 minutes to go. You want to start warming up. Okay, what I would do is about when I'm feeling that starting to happen, I would ahead of time have my assistant to unrobe me while all the other guys are sitting around waiting on the call. So ahead of time, I would have them to take my robe off, and I hit a few poses, then they'd throw it back on me. And so it was at that moment when they would see me at the very best I was going to be for that particular day, and trying to throw them off their game or have them to say, wow, man, Lee Haney looks great. Man, I don't stand a chance. That was my mindset, to mess with their heads. And so I had a tendency to do that on purpose. And as I look back and as I've heard later, it worked on several occasions with several of the competitors. Whether it worked with Dorian or not, I'm not sure. But I do feel still, as hard as Dorian tried to say, well, and I've heard him say it in an interview, this guy's my enemy now. I can't look at him in the same light. And that's correct. But I still feel that level of respect and that level of awe was still there. Because it was there for me when I stood on the stage beside Frank Zane, Berto Fox, Roy Callender, and Sergio Olivier. You know, I was the youngest cat coming up, and here I am at the 1984 Olympia. You better believe it was in my head that these guys I was on the stage with legends that I had looked up to and mimicked some of their training routines. So I knew that was in Dorian's head too. So I felt, and I knew without a doubt, I had the upper edge of his psyche. I strongly felt that. Did he look fearful on the stage? Of course not. Gladiators don't show fear. They do what they got to do. But I was fully confident that was going to be my last set and my best set. And I knew that Dorian was coming along, so I had to be at my very best. When you're going for your 8th Mr. Olympia win, you have to do something differently to look differently on that last one, because you got this new mass monster coming, and the audience has been watching you for the last 7 years. So what can you show them that you haven't shown them before? And so at that last Mr. Olympia, I was at 254 pounds, which is 4 pounds heavier than the previous Mr. Olympia. My physique was fuller. I use a training system that I would normally drop about 4 weeks from the Mr. Olympia. When I say training system, the system I generally use was called a 3-on-off-1, which is Monday, Wednesday, Friday off, then Monday, Wednesday, Friday off. I would generally switch from that system to a straight 6 the last 4 weeks. But what I noted in switching to the straight 6 the last 4 weeks in the previous Mr. Olympias, my body stayed fatigued until a day and a half before the actual show, where the muscles really started to fill out and pop. So I took a chance, and I not so much as taking a chance, I just studied closer my body as I was following through on the 3-on-off-1 all the way to the last 4 weeks. And I said, listen, this is already working very well. My muscles are full. My legs recovered with the on 3-off-1. So let's not fix what's not broken. So I stayed with the on 3-off-1, which allowed me to stay fuller, allowed me to stay bigger. When I hit the stage, it was a done deal. Everything was just as I wanted it to be. I filled out and my carbohydrates hit the cells just as I wanted it to be. So all the science worked out. So that last Olympia was my best. But guess what? It had to be the best because Dorian was there. And that was my last set, best set too. That's it. Let somebody else fight with this youngster. I'm out of here.
How good is it to have someone like a Dorian coming in at that time and then later going on to kind of change the game with that mass monster style? I mean, I guess at the time, it's probably not a pleasant thing, but in retrospect, it gets you to go the extra mile, doesn't it? I mean, we're only as good as our competitors.
You got that right. Dorian he had size that was unparalleled to anybody else that I had competed with previously.
Style. And
Dorian, size, what I say, I was 254, and Dorian, I believe, at the time was probably about 240, 245, I believe, something like that, in his first Olympia. And of course, he got bigger for his Olympias after that. But that was a whole nother era. My era was one, I would say, more of a classic physique. I had a 31-inch waist, so it was more of a sweeping type of, let's say, Arnold, Zane, Robbie Robinson type of physique. Dorian was one more of a hard, grainy, larger style, which is a different type, but it was then becoming a different era. And that era said, okay, this is what bodybuilding should look like. That is what that era craved. And Dorian was the beginning of that era, because after Dorian, you had Ronnie Coleman. After Ronnie Coleman, you had I can't think of his name, with the blonde hair, the other mass monster. But anyway, they followed in succession with mass and more size and so forth. So my physique was what it was, and it was what the judges wanted to see for that era. And Dorian in that era was magical for me. It made me Mr. Olympia 8 years in a row. And when the next era came, it was then Dorian's era, which that's what the judges and that's what bodybuilding wanted to see for that era. So all eras have its champions and have the thing that it loves and wants to see, and its fans who wants to see it. So,
yeah. So I texted Dorian to see if he had a question for you before we came on. And again, Dorian's an incredible man. He's become a great friend and a mentor as well. We had him on the show back in 2013, like I said, January. We had him back on a couple years later, and he was trying to transforming in front of our eyes, just becoming this kind of a sage and a real spiritual and a real mentor type man to a lot of young people. And he invited me down to Marbella, and we went down with the film crew and we made a documentary about him and how he kind of transitioned, because I think a lot of guys get stuck that I'm a bodybuilder my whole life, and they don't know when to kind of transition to someone else. And Dorian did that really well. So I asked him if he had any questions. He didn't say he had a question, but he wanted to say this. So I'm going to tell you exactly what he said. He texted me back and he said, quote, "I never told Lee what a huge inspiration he was to me, especially as a family man and a champion. He was a role model, but I didn't tell him when we met as I was so competitive," unquote. What do you say to that?
Wow, that's quite a compliment coming from Dorian, but it doesn't surprise me. Dorian has always been, to me, a very humble and beautiful, beautiful person. A little funny too, I was when we were in Atlanta at one of the Mr. Olympias. So of course I retired, and Dorian all geeked up and looking good and everything. He says to me, "Lee, what do you think we have another go at it?" I said, "Dorian, are you kidding?" I said, "I'm going fishing, man." That was so funny. But also prior to that, which was brought to my attention by a guy named Peter McGough. Peter McGough is from Great Britain. Peter writes for Flex Magazine, Muscle and Fitness. He's one of the last of the historians of bodybuilding brought past to present. And I was in England doing a guest appearance at one of the shows. I think it was the British Bodybuilding Championship. And so anyway, I needed some carbohydrates, because, we were supposed to eat about every 2 hours or so. And it was this youngster in the audience that was sort of helping backstage. He was helping backstage. And he had some apples and fruit. And so he offered me what he had. And come to find out by Peter that youngster was Dorian, So
Wow.
it's amazing, the same way with O.J. Simpson meeting Jim Brown, as a kid. And here he is knocking on my door a few years later. So, man, it's an awesome journey, man, to see where Dorian is now, his transition, how he's enjoying life. I mean, I really get a thrill seeing him now into yoga, taking care of his body. Listen, as gladiators, man, we put our bodies through a lot of craziness. And the body don't forget all of that you've left. Your joints still say, hey, man, you remember that, right? Every time you wake up in the morning, you remember all of that crazy squatting you did. I'm still here just waiting to get you. And Dorian has been wise enough to change gears, with the yoga and the cycling and to bring the weight down so that he can live a healthier life. I myself has done the same thing. I'm into more functional training, using the ropes, using medicine ball, doing yoga stretches, all of those different kinds of things. It come a time when you have to pull the sword off as a gladiator in the helmet and the breastplate and say, okay, now this is for you young guys. Let me show you how to do it now. I've been there, done that. So both of us are more on the teaching scale of showing young athletes what to do and what not to do. And then the other side of it too, we know that we're finite creatures. We're not going to live forever. And if we can use what we've accomplished over the span of our lifetime as a competitor to impact the lives of other young athletes, other people, then, man, what a thrill to do so. That's what's so cool about the second half of the journey, being able to impact those younger athletes and point them in the direction of being successful at it, but also letting them know too that this doesn't last forever. And you need to do it in such a way that you don't destroy your physical body, because at the end of the day, you still want to be functional. You want to enjoy your grandkids as I am. I have 3 beautiful granddaughters. I'm still able to run with them, not full speed, but we still able to do fun stuff together. And I got my health. And that's what it's all about. Your health is your wealth. And you want that at the end of the day.
That's really well said. It's interesting now because a lot of the kids these days look back to, Dorian's era and your era, and they say that your bodies look better than the guys do nowadays. And there's this interesting, kind of a throwback to where they're like, man, maybe these guys were the peak of the game as opposed to nowadays. What are your thoughts on that? I know that, as humans, styles always change. You see music and hairstyles and fashion changes. So it's natural that, like you said, the judging of bodybuilding would change. But what do you think of the kids now looking back to those eras saying these guys were better looking than the current ones?
Well, something, it takes time to build a masterpiece. The era in which Dorian and I got our language of training from, we're from that of Arnold and Frank Zane and Robbie Robinson. Form, technique, training principles. Nothing was done overnight. It took time. I mean, I've seen pictures of Dorian when he was like 15 years old. Look how, that amount of time that it was taken to develop his physique. I mean, I was lifting weights when I was 11 years old. Then by the time I was 16, I was competing in bodybuilding competitions. It takes time. What I see now in this era is a lot of the athletes, they train extremely heavy, too heavy. And the training principles in which they adhere to are not principles as it relates to building quality. You know, you see some of these training approaches now where a guy may train once every 7th day. So what in the world is that? And when you look at the physiques on the stage, you see the results of that. You don't see definition as much, or muscle separation, or muscle maturity. It takes time to get muscle maturity. One of my favorites, a guy named Albert Beckles, and we talked earlier, Albert is from Great Britain. Listen, when I won my second Mr. Olympia in Belgium in 1985, Albert was 56 at the time.
Wow.
56 years young. He looked absolutely incredible, placing second to me. He would have gotten me if I hadn't been in the tip-top shape. But even at the age of 31, when I had retired, I never reached the pinnacle of muscle maturity like Albert Beckles because I was in and out of the game. Well, Albert was still competing when he was in his 60s and looking incredible. It takes time to build a masterpiece. It takes the proper training principles. And to train once every 7th day or once every 5th day, it's ridiculous. Those are the training routines of power lifters who need the extra time for heavy weight training. And if you did more than that, more than 7 days within muscle groups, you can end up with a lot of injuries, which is now taking place with a lot of athletes in our sport, whereby with the 3-on-off-1 or the straight 6, which is a little bit, as I said earlier, tends to overtrain the body a bit. But of course, during Arnold's era, that's what they did. But at the same token, they didn't train as heavy. They trained more frequently, but not as heavy. The 3-on-off-1 give you an ability to sort of train a slightly heavy and still at the same time give the body the extra recovery time. So the lack of the proper routines, the lack of proper training principles is causing physiques of today to be bigger but lack quality. You see a lot of guys look like mutants. When during the course he was a mass monster, and then as you saw Ronnie as mass and Jay Cutler, you still didn't look like a mutant. You know, things were still proportionate. It was larger, but during physique still had the symmetry and the balance to it. See, that's what you don't see now. You'll see guys with little calves, big thighs. You see a guys with huge shoulders, but then narrow width or high lats, because the ability or the tools or the knowledge to develop a complete physique with everything where it's supposed to be, long lats, full calves, are not there in the training principles that we are here to growing up. Totally different, which also, Brian, is why I wrote this book here called Totally Awesome. I published this book in 1986. I did it again in 1991 after my last Olympia. And I recently did it again last year. Reason being is the lack of proper training information that's out there. I talked about the 3-on-off-1. Why is it better? Why is it better than a straight 7? I talk about the straight 6 and when to use it and then when to back away. I talk about a 3-day power circuit as to the benefits of it. After your body's gone through a competition, it's been traumatized, let's give it enough time to recover. That then and only then should a once every 7-day routine be used, not as a regular part of your daily training. So that's how a lot of these guys get so mixed up, because they follow a lot of these so-called gurus and coaches on the internet who haven't won the Creekwater USA or the Creekwater Great Britain yet. And they adhere to these judges. I mean, these coaches who don't know diddly squat.
Yeah, there's a lot of that happening today, and I want to get into that for sure. You know, you just broke down exactly what's flawed about, you know, the current bodybuilding today in an amazing way. So thank you for that, Lee. It actually just became more comprehensible to me, explaining those different eras. One of the things you mentioned was Arnold. Now, Arnold had the 7, you got the 8s. Arnold was there back in the early days. When you look back now, where you're at now in 2020, what did Arnold contribute to the sport, both good and bad? And what was it like for you to beat him in that number of competitions? Was that something that was on your mind? It was obviously a big deal for everybody, but what was that like in your own head?
Well, like I said, Arnold really gave the bodybuilding a footprint that is well respected all around the world. He put bodybuilding right in front of the entire world, and thanks to people like Joe Weider with Muscle and Fitness magazine and Flex magazine, Shape magazine, who gave bodybuilding a voice. So that was extremely important, and not to also mention the importance of Naba, who was there, who started the Mr. Universe. All of that started right there in Great Britain. So that was even before the IFBB was formed. So I got to really give my hats off to the earlier pioneers who gave Joe Weider a platform to step from. So you have to give credit to them too. It was right there in Great Britain that it all began to happen. So, but Arnold took it to the screens. He took it to the politics. He did an incredible job. And my being able to come off of some of the successes of Arnold and then take bodybuilding and go, to the next level was also incredible. And I have to give thanks to him for drawing attention to the fact that, hey, bodybuilders are special people. We're smart. We're intelligent. We're approachable. We're a benefit to society. I had my show on ESPN called Lee Haney's Championship Workout. I had a show on the Trinity Broadcast Network, which is a Christian network that's internationally called Totally Fit. I was chairman to the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sport under President Bill Clinton. And I'm also in the International Sports Hall of Fame. So it's a lot of different things that has been made possible through the sacrifice and the success of people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And where I am now in this era, I'm still enjoying what I do. I'm able to share what I do in so many different ways. And it's truly a blessing to be where I am, to have traveled to more than 30 different countries around the world and to have a fellowship of iron brotherhood with people everywhere is awesome. So hats off to all of the people who made that possible for me to step into the shoes of.
Was it important that you beat his 7 with your 8 Mr. Olympia championships?
Well, you know what? When I set out, I didn't think of, okay, let's win the Mr. Olympia 8 times. Listen, to win the Mr. Olympia 1 time is a miracle, And after I won the first one, I'm like, wow, I just became Mr. Olympia. I just became the one thing that I desired to do and reading the magazines ever since I was a youngster. And I'm him now. And so, okay, let's train for the next one. And I win that one. Then one of my training partners, a great friend of mine, and we worked out together. He said, Lee, man, let's go ahead and hit this 3. Then guess what? I won the 3rd one because Frank Zane had got 3. I said, well, if I get 3, man, at least I've tied Frank Zane. And then I said, well, let me go for 5. So next thing I hit 5. So, wow, man, Arnold got 6 in a row, and maybe I could tie that record, do 6. So next thing I hit 6, and then I said, okay, let's go 7. 7 is a record in itself. Nobody's done 7 in a row, but still, I don't have the record of 7 overall. So the next thing I hit 7. And at 7, I said, well, man, 7 Mr. Olympias in a row, that's a record, and it's tied for Arnold. And I sat down and I had a talk with my wife, Shirley. And, Shirley was my second grade sweetheart growing up. So we've known each other forever. She's an athlete. She played volleyball. She was in track and field. name it, baseball.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.